Well, hello and good afternoon. It's John Krant. Well, gosh, today we are going to explore what to do about our resume in this pandemic world. Our story is going to have to change a little bit, as is our approach to quite a number of things. So let's jump right in. Let me just share my screen here. Welcome again. You know, our resume is a very important marketing document. It is a tool to help us essentially prepare to sell ourselves. It's part of how we take back control in the process. Let me just check my connection here. 1 second here, just for my remote. It'll be a little easier if I have a full remote. That sounds like we have it there. There it is, Resume Renovation. So, you know, when I chose this title, let me just come a little larger on screen here. When I chose this title, you know, I think renovation really hits the challenge. When we go to reinvent our story, it's just like an actual renovation. Now, a few years back, I was lucky enough to do my kitchen and my bath at the same time. And unfortunately, I'm not of the means to go live someplace else while that happens. So in reality, that means 4 months of coughing and hacking and worrying. And, you know, first thing I did was probably what most people would do. I ran out to Home Depot, got plastic, got tape. I'm quickly trying to cover everything else that's not involved. You know, those things are, you know, we want to protect those things. I wish there was something valuable in my apartment. There's really not. There are things that are emotionally important to me. You know, sitting out on my kitchen counter, I have a hand-carved little picture frame of my father, you know, doing his confirmation back in the 1920s, a long time ago. Has tremendous emotional value to me, has no actual value to you. So as we begin to think about breaking down the walls and restructuring things, we're going to have to maybe take that sledgehammer after some stuff that we're emotionally attached to as we reinvent the whole story. That's part of how you're going to retell your story to make sure that everyone can see it. Now, solving our resume issues, some people think, oh, that's just typesetting. If I typeset it a little bit better, well, yes, typesetting will help. Absolutely, typesetting it the right way with someone that understands what they're doing will help the breathability, readability, help your story convey. But really, we have to think about the story has to change as well. So maybe a dramatic format shift, and what I teach is very different than what other people may teach. Let me be super clear. If I am reinventing a client's resume, not a secret that I work with clients, I help them reinvent their resume, reinvent their LinkedIn profiles. If I'm reinventing someone's resume, not a single sentence anywhere on the resume. Why would I have a sentence on a resume in a world where people don't read? So we have to move our minds away from it and really understand that the resume today is something very, very different. This is going to require a paradigm shift in our own approach, our own thinking, because without a little bit of a revolutionary approach, it's not really going to have the outcome that we want. Now, in case you haven't seen me before, John Krant, author, career coach, and speaker, resume and LinkedIn guru. A little bit about my background. You should understand everybody's background that is teaching you something, so you also understand how to parse and value the information they're giving you. What should I utilize? What should I put up on the shelf? Well, 3.5 years of my entire 8 years in recruitment was as the national trainer. So I started out before that on a desk as a traditional headhunter, having to go into that competitor company, find the superstar, lure them out. Very similar to a glorified dating guru, really. And then after quite a number of years doing that, I moved up to be the national trainer. We had a 100 office recruiting system. So every recruiter that would come into one of the offices, potential recruiter, they'd come into my 90-day program that teaches them how hiring really works, which is not how people think it works, or we wouldn't really need this lecture today. Of course, ended up being VP over all 100 offices before moving out to do what I do now, which is give lectures like this in a non-pandemic year for the New York Public Libraries, Job Search Central for several locations of the New York State Department of Labor, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, Harvard Business School Club of New York City, many others as well, and working one-on-one with my clients. So you have to think about, we're going to do something very, very different. We're going to change the rules that you never agreed to in the first place. That's the subtitle of my book. Simply to move obstacles out of our way. Now, today we're going to look at the supposed rules of resume, and we're going to love those rules that work for us, and we're going to disregard those rules that work against us, because your job is to inspire the person on the other end. Ooh, maybe. Ooh, I like this person. I have to hear more. I have to know more. Your resume's job is to warm up the audience, to get them excited about you, not to tell them every single thing about you. Some articles over my LinkedIn here that you can see up on screen that will also kind of help you in your job search. Don't miss that first one, which was how to not let your resume become resume roadkill. That article, by the way, will piggyback a little bit on what I teach you today. Of course, if you haven't taken my LinkedIn lecture, you can watch it live right on my website, selfrecruiter.com, about halfway down the page. As you see here, start and stop, make me large, make the slides large, whatever you want. That's a great step-by-step tutorial as you then, after your resume, then take that accomplishment of what you built on that resume, take it over to LinkedIn, and now how do you really expand it into a full-out three-dimensional sales brochure? That's a great lecture. Of course, across all of the lecture series, it's about one thing. How is it that I'm going to essentially be this one great recruiter that looks after one great candidate, which is, of course, you. So you have to be the recruiter managing you. You have to be the individual candidate. You also have to be the strategist, the cheerleader. You are everything. That's part of becoming this person that's in control. Now, the main part of becoming a self-recruiter is building your network in a very different way. That's really the LinkedIn piece. The second part of it is always keeping one eye on the toughest competitor imaginable. You know, those 4, 5, 6 people that are just going to go after the job and they're going to get that job, because really it's not as just easy as, oh, I'll just send my resume. I'm perfect. I'll send my resume in. Everybody is sitting home doing what you're doing, which is hitting that darn button. And almost never does it really say apply. It's always submit, all capital letters, till we're so submissive. It's like a Friday night waiting for the phone to ring. Oh, it's going to ring. It's going to ring. If it rings, you know it's going to be a telemarketer. This becomes a rut that leaves us in a very unhappy place. Now, this is not very uplifting. Some people go, gosh, that's not uplifting, John. Why is that in your lecture? It's reality. If we ignore reality, we're going to get stuck. So whatever it is, you got to get over it. If there's something to fix, assess, change, absolutely. And then quit looking in the rearview mirror. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, if I only did, because you'll never see the opportunity that's just over your horizon. You have to be in control of your optimism as well. Now, in terms of different techniques, we can look at the usual customer expected. We can hopefully think a little more unusual, unconventional, and unexpected, which means we're going to give ourselves a little bit of license. Your job is to be truthful, but be persuasive. Your job is not to be confessional. Now, I grew up Catholic. I know all about confession. There is no sin of omission. There's only sin of commission. So really on a resume, I can leave out any part that I'd like to leave out, as long as every single detail that is down there is absolutely letter true, can never be called into question. Your job is to assemble the story in the way that benefits you, that's still truthful, and be persuasive. Your job is not simply, you know what I'll be? I'll be a pretty little flower. I'll be a pretty little flower. They'll just pick me. Unfortunately, they're not going to pick you. It doesn't really work that way. So let's really talk about this. We're in a digital world. Why is it that the resume still matters? Well, it's how you take control of the discussion, or at least typically about the first way you take control of the discussion. But if we think about the challenge of becoming hired, and I won't even say it's numerically worse with the pandemic. It certainly will feel that way, but the numbers even before the pandemic were really stacked against us. So many of us would send in the resume. I'm perfect, but I never heard back. Why didn't I hear back? I was perfect. We didn't understand the numbers. So behind the scenes, when you understand the challenge, you're likely to change a few things. By the way, I do want to mention, in case I hit a little bit of an internet glitch where it drops out for a second, I could disappear for 30, 60, 90 seconds. You'll see my nice green screen background. Trust that I'll be back as quick as it reconnects. So by those numbers, let's break it down. 1,000 to 2,000 resumes being sent in for any decent job. Yeah, after some decent job, that's 1,000 to 2,000 resumes. I hope you're listening. I did not say it was 1,000 to 2,000 qualified candidates. In fact, the vast majority of these folks are absolutely not qualified. 95% of them are not right for this job. Why are they here? Well, most times people will see a great job, and if they're even tangential to that job, they'll be like, oh, if they have that job, they must need a person like me too. Oh, send my resume in. They'll just see me. And that ends up clogging the entire system. So who could read 1,000 to 2,000 resumes and do all of their work? I don't really know anybody, but I don't think we're really quite getting it, because there's that 1,000 emails, 1,000 resumes, 1,000 cover letters. Now we're up to 3,000 items that we have to read. Can anybody read any of that and do all of your work? But you're still not quite getting it. If you are responding to a recruiter, and I don't really care if that's an external headhunter like I was, or an internal recruiter at a large company, if their title is recruiters, typically recruiters going to work on 10 open jobs at the same time. So it's not 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, it's 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. Who can read these 30,000 pieces of communications? Nobody. Some of it may get glanced at, but nobody can read that stuff. So you have mere seconds to convey your value, capture their attention, somehow go, oh, I'm the one. I don't want to set false expectations here. I don't want you to think you're going to go home, spend 2 hours of homework, have your new resume. Oh yeah, you may have your first iteration of your new resume, but very likely it will take you 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations of that resume to get to the right one. Each time you work on your resume, you're going to do a 3-second test, which is something I'm going to teach you in today's lecture. You're going to compare the old and the new, what works, what's better, what still doesn't work. And then you go back to the drawing board every single time till it gets better, better, better. If you stop too early, it won't elevate your brand the way it should. If you work through to the end, which is the real homework, you're going to have a resume that really opens doors for you that were closed to you before. And by the way, if you need someone really sharp to work on your resume, I think you know how to reach me at selfrecruiter.com. Packages are all listed there. Yes, be capable and qualified, but let's be clear. You are not hired because you're capable and qualified. Now, don't mishear that. I would never hire someone that I did not believe was capable or qualified. But that's not the criteria. Why would that is not the criteria. That's a baseline minimum I'd look for. Actually, in most cases, why you are hired is why are you interesting? What makes you tick? What drives you? What are you all about? Which could have something to do with what you offer professionally. Could have nothing to do with what you offer professionally. It could be something in your non-work life. If I hire you, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to spend more time with you than I spend with my loved ones. That's why we want to like the people. It's really that simple. So don't forget to tell enough of your maybe even non-work life story so they understand why you're interesting and what makes you tick, in addition to being, of course, capable and qualified and all those things that we need to be. So a little bit of clarification between the resume and LinkedIn. Now, this is the resume lecture, but these two marketing documents are all about you and they're related. Resume to me is really about catching or piquing or drawing that interest. Typically, it is the first time they may take notice of you. Not always. Could start on LinkedIn, could start in conversation, but typically the resume is the most normal place that they catch attention first. To me, LinkedIn is about closing the deal with you positioned as the very best individual. And that takes a LinkedIn profile that really elevates you by being a 3-dimensional sales brochure all about you that drives that reader to one singular conclusion. My gosh, if I hire this person, best business decision I make today. That's how these two documents are related. They're going to be physically very different. One is going to, as you're going to hear from me, be very, very, very short and concise. And the other is this fold out 3-dimensional sales brochure all about you that they can get lost reading about all the interesting things about you. Together, these two act to influence folks. Now you look at this one, it's kind of like getting hit in the head with a brick. If you've ever seen me speak live, I'm pretty much like this, except I have an audience. And when I have an audience, gosh, don't you feed on that energy even a little bit more. So yes, I am well caffeinated. I have a lot of adrenaline flowing through. I'm very excited and passionate about what I teach. So when I was at the public library, right after one of my lectures, I had someone come up to me with this resume. And they suddenly go, okay, I've been told all I can expect is more of this. And they give it, I'm like, what is it? I'm like, and I'm me with the caffeine, the adrenaline, everything else, the excitement after talking for 90 minutes. And right away I start to go, it's that brick in the head. And I better ask a question before I fall asleep. That will be rude. And I go, oh, what would you like to do? I'd like to be in events. I'm like, oh, that's some good energy. Have you ever been in events? Ouch. I'm me. Let's just bring this full center here. I'm me with my background. It says right there, events coordinator. I'm me and I couldn't see it. If I can't see it, how do you think anybody else can see it? They just see the law firm, this wall of text, and they go, oh, more law firm for you. I don't even know what else to say. More law firm for you. We're going to have to transform a story where the career comes to life, even zooming in on this. Does it really get that much better? Not really. By the way, there's law firms and there's law firms. Ooh, that's a law firm. Money. Okay. Yeah, good law firm. Elevates the brand. But it's done in such a way that all we can think about is the law firm. Now, here is this same exact background. You'll notice there's no sentence structure on this page. There's no sentences here. Same exact background. I would argue that the law firm itself is even elevated even more in this presentation. And yet you can see that this person is all about events. They did events at the Guggenheim, at Lincoln Center, at the Met. I'm like, oh, why don't we talk about that story? You'd be working in events tomorrow. Well, I didn't just do that. I did the RSVP, the catering, and I was a speaker wrangler. I'm like, speaker wrangler? Who are these speakers? Ted Koppel, Charlie Rose, Tom Brokaw. Yes, well, some of those names have to be updated and occasionally even removed. You're going to have to go through a transformation. You've been telling your story probably in a very limited way for such a long time. That's the way you know your story, your product. You're a product that has to be positioned and marketed and put on the shelf in a certain way and let the lighting hit it a certain way. They have to feel something. That's how you begin to create engagement, which really is closer to that type of engagement. This is how you're going to begin to influence them, get them to fall in love with your background. And small little changes change the perception of what you bring to the table, who you are, and of your overall value. Now, our personal branding has a tremendous amount to do with setting our value. What is brand? Well, I'm not going to read all these things up here. You can see what it is. It's really everything that could separate us from another person. That can be physical items like the resume or LinkedIn. Well, some might argue that those are digital as well. And so are they physical? But it can be the soft touch things like how you approach someone or the language you use or how you prepare for an interview so you can speak like one of their employees. They hear their own employee during your own interview. Look for my interview intervention lecture coming up. That'll help as well. So we have to think about all these things that can separate out our brand. Now, it's almost easier to teach you what I need to teach you by just showcasing a few resumes I pulled right off the internet. Now, these were over on Pinterest. Someone was collecting resumes, and here I saw Kelly's. We're going to skip by that one here. Julie here, by the way, Julie here, when I look at this, some good things here, but the section headers are a problem. The dream, leveling up, mad skills. Everybody starts somewhere, anything else. By the way, I used to work creative. That was one of the 3 fields I placed. This could work in creative, absolutely. But if Julie wants to go work in corporate, that's not going to work. I don't really get Julie. What's she all about? She'd have to redo that in whole resume because it just wouldn't communicate to that audience. You know what this is? This is a one-trick pony. You know, I know this took a lot of work, a lot of time, gimmickry. You know what I imagine? I imagine if Ricardo here, if I hire Ricardo and I assign Ricardo something, I imagine he's going to not work on what he's supposed to work on and work on a lot of side things he likes to work on. Sends the wrong message. Julia! Look at the bottom here. And I didn't type these notes. It says, who said the name had to be at the top anyway? Okay. Well, I'll say it. If someone needs to say it, the name has to be at the top. Subtitle of my book is Changing the Rules. There are certain ones you cannot change. Again, I'm not quite sure why you might want to look like a 15, 20-year-old MapQuest printout. if some of us even remember MapQuest. One-trick ponies, which can work, by the way, rarely actually work. So it's a tremendous amount of wasted time. Martin here, Kudos to Martin on his brand. I get it. I get it. Is it worth 25% of the entire real estate to tell me your name and contact information? I don't really think so. I think that's a poor investment choice. Also, the same with this resume as really existed on most of the prior resumes. We have an information architecture problem. Just like any reasonable building has to have an architect. Otherwise, how do you get it all to work? Everything has to be planned out and has to work, or it's not going to work together. The information on your resume has to be designed that way. And guess who the designer is? You. What if they only read 20% of your resume? Which 20% do you want them to read? Should I read down the blue column, left to right? How's it supposed to work? And if I actually am honest, all I can really see here is education, internship, and personal skills. Una, artist for hire. Illustration and graphic design. Fields I used to place. And unfortunately, Una is neither an illustrator nor a graphic designer. You have to be very good at what you do, and you can't just throw your hat in the ring. Oh, maybe they'll just hire me. Here's the 5 areas that you need to work on to create a super winning resume that has effect. We're going to come back to each one of these. We're going to move quickly. You are a product 2. Your resume, the new definition. Don't forget, we're coming right back. Resumes goals, understanding stacks of resumes, and of course, the 3-second test, which I'm going to teach you. Let's go back to the beginning. You're this product 2. I think you really get that by now, or at least you understand they're buying your time and talents. But you have to think about, well, do you want to be the store brand product? You know, the coloring on the label is a little off. The taste is a little off. The price is quite nice. Price is quite nice. Or do you want to be one of those big national brands where the coloring on the label is a little better? The taste, the taste is just how I like it. Everything else commands a different respect and a different cost. You're this product. How are you going to elevate yourself? So you have to begin to think about yourself as this product and begin to think about all your skills as marketable assets that you have to talk about, that you have to present. And again, yes, make sure you check off that capable and qualified. Tell them enough to make sure that that part is covered, but don't forget the why are you interesting and what makes you tick. And that means you're going to have to actually go back and know what your story is. Now, when I'm doing this for my clients, it's pretty simple. We sit down, we have about a 90-minute deep dive interview. I recommend the same process for yourself. You're going to sit down and close down for an inventory, just like some store does. They lock the door, everybody's trapped inside. They try to count everything up and see what's actually there, so they really have some idea. Yeah, the computer system tells them what's in the store, but that's not always reality, because a lot of that product walks out the door without stopping at the cash register. So they have to do an inventory. Well, same in our story. We may have gone through our career and dismissed, oh, that was nothing, oh, so long ago. You've probably dismissed and forgotten so much. You've got to go back and discover the story. So maybe a 90-minute deep dive interrogation, go back and find out what, I have to grill. I have to find out what this person's all about. What happened here? Was there school before this? Were you working while you were in school? Were you doing internships? Were you on any sports things or other community things? What am I missing? Probably going to come up with 8 or 9 pages of notes. That's about what I come up with, which is way too much for a resume, also way too much for a LinkedIn profile. But do yourself a favor and then grab a highlighter and now be very stingy. Your job is to be stingy, not to. Everything on these 8 or 9 pages is very close to you. Oh, I love it all. I get it. I get it. I get it. But very stingy, only the nuggets of gold, drops of perfume, ruby, diamond, emerald. I'll give them a little bit of a highlight. Now, all those highlights, you probably have a pretty good idea of what has to become the core message for the resume. The rest of the items, you're going to have to begin to filter through a lens or filter through the lens of a question. Question is simple. If you've seen my other lectures, you certainly know it. And that is, why is it going to be the best business decision they're going to make today if they choose to hire you? Now, resume, the new definition. I hope you have a lot of ink ready for this one. It's going to take a little bit to write down. Are you ready? A simple sales sheet that creates desire. That's its job, by the way. Oh, I have to see this person. I have to talk with them. Get them in here. Put them on the list. That's a desire reaction. Simple sales sheet. Let's think about Best Buy for a second. I'm a pretty normal guy. I'll be walking down the street in a non-pandemic world, and I'll feel some attraction to Best Buy as I'm walking by. I'm like, oh, I should go in there. Maybe there's like some gizmo or something. There must be something in there I want. And if you go in there, they have these very large things, 71 inches, 81 inches, 115 inches, never be able to afford that thing. These very large televisions. By the way, if you are not single, that is not an individual decision. If you like your life, if you don't like your life, hey, decide away. So they make something called a sales sheet or a tear sheet that sits right next to each one of those big televisions. It's a glossy pad, glue on the one end. Feels very satisfying when I zip off a sheet off the glue and I go, fantastic. It's everything that I need to take home and sell this television. If we had this television, I'd take out the trash, I'd do my chores on the weekend, I'd mow the lawn without being asked because life would be so special. Simple sales sheet. It's what I need to go home and sell. The people you are sending your resume to are not very good at selling you, even if they love you. Oh, I love this person. But they're not an expert at selling, so they turn around and have to walk down the hall or go meet with somebody else and they have to sell you. They're not very effective. A proper resume that is a sales sheet becomes a sales aid. That is a tool that will help them better sell you. So really, really important to develop this sales sheet. Now, your resume's goals. Now, its mission is to deliver the interview. By the way, that's a good test. If your resume is delivering the interviews that you want, very likely don't need to change it. If it is not delivering the interviews that you want, very likely you do need to change it. You've got to get those interviews. That's its job. So what goals have to be incorporated so it delivers those interviews? A clear, clean, straightforward format. This is a format where the information itself is put together in such a way it literally jumps off the page for the reader, almost reaches up and slaps them in the face. Specific items that you think are going to be most interesting to the decider, not what you want to say, but what do they want to hear that's still truthful. That has to jump off the page to them. And of course, we have to clearly inform about educational background. Notice that word absorb. They have to absorb this information because no one really wants to read it. And yet you can work on the resume in the way I'll teach you, just like you saw that events resume, and they can't help but absorb it because the information is so accessible to their brain. That's called taking away the work for the reader. That's where the real work is. Now, understanding stacks of resumes. So to be clear, I am not a fan of applying online. By the way, I know a lot of people apply online, but if you're my client and I find out you're applying online, I am not happy. Yes, I do understand many of my clients might apply online, but I would sure hope that if this is a job that rises to the level that, oh, I'm dying to get that job, I hope we understand that going through HR, unless you're trying to be hired within HR, is not a happy trip for most folks. HR's role is to rule you out. It's their only rule. That's what we have to do. I get thousands of people applying for a job. I have to pick up every one of those things and go, why aren't they right? Why aren't they right? Oh, this one looks pretty good. Oh, I got one that's pretty good. Put it in the right stack. Why aren't they right? Why aren't they right? That's how it works. So the other thing to layer on top of that is I would say that most times HR is working with a faulty idea of this job. It's called the job posting. It's not their fault. Managers really don't know how to write down what they're looking for. And whatever they write down, what tends to be a little bit of a let's take a lunch order. What do you think? A little salt, a little sugar, a little spice. Oh, must have this. No, won't be considered without this. Won't be considered without this. That's how that nonsense gets written. So I hope you didn't not go after a job you knew was right for you because you said, I don't have that one. Are you kidding me? Go after the decision maker. The decision maker changes everything. So what happens if I don't listen to John? I do hit the apply or submit button. I send it in where your resume is going off toward a gigantic black hole in space called the data warehouse. If it reaches the data warehouse, kiss it goodbye. Probably never going to see that resume again, or the odds are pretty small. But on the way to the data warehouse, it's going to stop in front of a person. That's your chance. That's your chance. So they're going to actually get a look. They're going to sort you into one of these three stacks. There might be somebody in here. That's the good stack. There may be somebody in here. Have to come back and take another look. Have to come back. But they don't come back. They don't come back because I have an incoming river of all new exciting resumes. Why would I go back to these people that couldn't quite convey their value to me the first time when I have all these new exciting ones to look at. So stack 2 becomes a dead end by default. They don't end up going back for another look. Stack 3, of course, is that thanks but no thanks. I'm not even quite sure why you sent that resume in. I know why you sent it in, because you thought there might be a job around this one that might fit you. So the secret that you may not like in this whole process is the length of time they're going to take before they stick you in stack 1, 2, or 3. It is literally 3 to 5 seconds. This is not a trainer exaggeration. You will never get longer than 5 seconds before you're in one of those stacks. And I'll show you how that works coming up. Your first goal is to get that resume into stack 1, or the likelihood that someone's actually going to ever read the resume is very, very tiny. The likelihood they're ever going to read that cover letter of yours is very, very tiny. The likelihood they'd ever read that email message of yours is very, very tiny, unless you get the resume into stack 1. It's only when I get down to a reasonable stack of resumes, I can't look at thousands, but reasonable stack of resumes, that I can then maybe consider these folks. But in today's world, 1,000, 2,000 resumes coming in, that's 50 resumes in the good stack. Let's go back to the basic question, basic premise up front. Who can read 50 resumes, 50 cover letters, 50 emails, and do all their own work? I still don't know anyone that can do it at that number. So there's a secondary sorting process that happens at this stage. You already made it into stack 1. Fantastic. I hope it don't get ruled out. And how they're going to rule you out is by copying your name, going over to LinkedIn. Not on LinkedIn. Out comes that resume over to stack 2. You just didn't quite get it. Wait a minute. Oh, you're on LinkedIn, but wait a minute. It's exactly what I have on the resume. Out comes the resume over to stack 2. You really even missed the challenge. By the time I'm looking at you on LinkedIn, I am looking for you to further convince me. Where is the additional content? Where is the additional persuasion? Where is the look behind the scenes that goes, oh, you're the one? LinkedIn is to close the deal. Very, very important. Think about this. But we've got to get the resume into stack 1, or we're dead in the water at this point. Now, I'm a big believer in a one-page resume, unless it's 2. But I sure hope you see how unhappy I am over here, how unhappy I am that we're dealing with a 2-page resume. There's really no time I will tell one of my clients it's okay to have a 2-page resume. Now, I was giving the LinkedIn lecture over at the Department of Labor a couple of years ago down on Varick Street, and it was the LinkedIn lecture. But of course, resume comes up. These 2 marketing documents are related. And I happen to mention resume, single sheet of paper in all cases. There's no exception. And some guy in back's like, come on. What if you got a 30-year career and you're a CEO? It's never going to fit. Okay. Take a breath. I hear you. But I don't think your reaction is because you're so unhappy with my answer. I think your reaction is because you're going, well, how did I get here? How come no one can see my value? Not a surprise. This guy hires me, turns around, sends me his stuff. Oh my goodness, it is 6 pages of my eyes bleeding. I can't even get through this story. Oh, very impressive. CEO and COO before that, and CFO before that, and 30 years of endless career. They just can't stop talking about it because they don't know how to edit. You know, when you get to a career at that level and that level of delivery, almost no detail is needed other than who are the players, and they just imagine vicariously. You've got to really pare down your story. And he's like, you're never getting that to a single sheet of paper. I'm like, boom, exclamation point. Of course, he's a CEO again, as he should be. 1-page resume. Now, what are we looking at? We're looking at your name, which really is your brand. We're looking at the current or last 3 employers and titles, and of course, educational background. Here's where I test your listening. Because right after the lecture, sometimes I'll hear people going, oh, John said just put the last 3 employers and titles. I did? When did I say that? I never said that. I said what we're looking at, and that's for time relevance of skills. If you asked me a different question, like what would you like in a resume? Well, thank you for asking. I love that question. I would like a resume to be complete from the time you enter the workforce to today. Again, it's a listening test. I said that's what I'd like. I did not say that would be the right solution for you. Some of us that may have worked back in the 1970s don't need to hear that, don't need to see that part. We're going to have to maybe truncate just a little bit. And of course, those recommendations are coming up. 3-second resume test. So after I get done with my resume, I'm going to go to this test every single time. And if you haven't even started your resume, it's good to do it right up front. So pull out your resume. It's just for you. No need for shyness. When I tell you, not until I tell you, when I tell you, you're going to have to look at your resume with fresh eyes. I know it's you, but you got to look at this person as if I don't know them. And in the time I allot you until I say stop, When I say stop, look up and just rhetorically tell yourself, what do I know about this person? Ready to take a look? Go ahead. And stop. And for those that weren't actually doing it, you were watching me and you probably saw me count from 1001 to 1005. It is never going longer than that until you're in one of those stacks. Most people look up from that and they go, oh, I can't tell you anything. And it's me. That is a resume that needs serious work. No one is going to read and digest your story these days. You have to change it, which is also why I object to objectives all the time. Objectives, those are like, what would I like to grow up and be someday? No one cares. And I certainly don't care as a hiring individual. I want to know what you're going to do for me, not what you want to be someday. This is not everybody gets a trophy. I'm only hiring the best of the best. So let's take the traditional objective statement space right at the top of the resume, preserve that space, but let's utilize it in a much more effective way. Objective statement would seem to imply that there must be some sentence structure up there. You know, I'm not going to read. So why don't we simply reuse that space for something I call a positioning title? The positioning title is always a dead bullseye of any job that you are applying for. So that is the part of the resume that should change continuously. The rest, if it's done correctly, does not ever change. The positioning title, like a chameleon, changes every single time. So when they look at your name, they go down to see employer title, they cross the positioning title space. It's so simple. They go, oh, it's just what I'm looking for. Yes, I am. And then they absorb how you contribute it to the companies below. By the way, it does not mean you ever have had to hold that job before. You're presenting yourself as qualified for the job. So let's go back to this brick in the head. There's a objective statement. I think you really get it. I mean, how far into it do I get? High energy, deep, and then my interest is over. I mean, the word profile is pulling more of everything. Look at how simple this one is. Campaign director, media and public relations, community liaison. Yeah, that's a nice, sharp positioning title. In this version, they're really positioning themselves for all three. If we were sending in for a campaign director or media and PR or community liaison, we would want to target that and add a little more detail, really elevating whichever one they're going after. Right now, it's hitting all three. We'll have a story about this one, but let me tell you about it. This is a more complex background. And they're an accomplished sales professional that wants to change directions. You know what they want? Software, hardware, and services. You see it right away. And suddenly I go, oh, it's just what I'm looking for. That story's coming up. We'll come back to it. Or you might have a more complex background. Here's someone that is working as a technical project and program manager, but they really want to take that expertise in a non-technical way and go help nonprofits and foundations do a much better job in their project management. Excuse me. So back to this high energy events planner. Yep, boy, you can't miss that. Now it says high energy events planner. That's the way I think of them. Or you go back to the one that's a little bit more brick in the head that doesn't work so well. You want to think about transforming that and adding clarity. Here is the story that essentially came out of all that text, where there's just enough pieces that jump into the brain. If I'm looking for an events person, this part is so exciting to me. Every reason why I might hire this person is there. By the way, this person originally was so worried about becoming mature, and sure, they were mature. They took out the scissors and cut off Martha Stewart Living. You want to work in events and you cut Martha Stewart Living off your resume, or House Beautiful Magazine where you did an event at Guggenheim, or European Travel and Life Magazine where you did event-related activities. I understand we may want to cut, but we have to be careful not to cut off our assets. Back to this one. I promised you a little bit more story on this one. This is a resume. Client came out of the Carolinas. He'd call me up. This was a while back. At the time, called me up and said, hey, I've been in contract furniture sales for 10, 11 years now. I had a great run. I am so done selling furniture. This is someone that might sell like 1,000 desks type thing. I am so done. I'm so done. But every time I send out the resume, they go, we don't need a furniture salesperson. Obviously, this is the new resume, not the original. And so since it was 11 or 12 years, they used almost the entire resume to talk about that one job. Everything else was just a tiny footnote with no detail. And of course, as I'm saying, you know, talking to them and they're going, I don't want to do furniture. I'm like, well, what would you like to do? Oh, I'd like to be in software, hardware, services. I'm like, oh, that's a great field. It's a field I used to place. I'm like, Have you ever done it? And they had 15 years earlier. Some of those footnotes down there with no detail. That may be someone on today's lecture listening in. That may be your challenge. You may have 15-year-old experience you want to sell. So what we did in this case was we shortened the current story down to a super bullet list. If you look closely here, you realize other than corporate office furnishings, and of course I mentioned Price Modern, which I did not know as a brand. Hayworth, I certainly knew as a brand. Other than those three references on the first two lines, there's not a single word here about furniture. It's every single thing that would make a sales manager jump out of their chair. Achieve $50 million cumulative sales to date, if I could see it, a little tiny. Ranked top 10 revenues every year since 2002. Developed a strong pipeline. Jump out of the chair. And then a little bit further down, we were able to expand where they could see the software, hardware, services connection. This is the bottom of a resume to teach you something here. Yeah, whole resume above this. But at some point, if you are cutting your background a little bit, you're going to want to go, well, where do I edit? So in talking with this particular client, we decided, well, let's start or stop your story, depending on which way you look at it, in 1999. And we'll do it with Electronic Data Systems, EDS. I don't know if you're familiar with EDS, but EDS is one of those companies. Every industry has one or two of those companies. That company that if they hire you, oh my gosh, you must be very, very good. Financial services, we know who that is. Goldman Sachs is only one of them. EDS has that same reputation. You must walk on water almost. I'm sure they all hire some stinkers, but the feeling is you must be exceptional. Okay, so that's a great place to either start or end the story. But then there's 3 prior employers, and 2 of these 3 prior employers also rise to that same stunning level. Kaiser Permanente and PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers, the same reputation. There's 3 crown jewels here in one eye. You know what? I didn't mean to hit that button. Let's just go back one so you can say a couple more things. 3 crown jewels all within their visual eye. From a size perspective, and sizing is coming up, EDS, that's 10-point bold. The 3 prior employers, that is 3/4 of 1 inch on the sheet of paper. The brands themselves, System Alliance, PwC, Kaiser Permanente, those are probably about 8 bold. The title is about 7.5 bold. Location is probably 7 or 6.5, tiny, tiny, tiny. And the whole thing's 3/4 of 1 inch. And this is like understanding it's the cherry on top of the dessert. It's a few things of drizzle on top of the dessert before the cherry. These things are special. They all don't have to scream. They work perfectly this way. Other thing to teach you at the very, very bottom here, I am a big fan of splitting the bottom of the resume. Only way to do it effectively from utilizing the space. There are 3 universities here, but only 2 of them are treated the same. The bachelor and the master's degree, I'm sorry, they certainly trump the PMP. Sorry for that word. The PMP, if this is your field, I know you're jumping out of the chair. You go, PMP. Oh my gosh, tattooed on my forehead, PMP. I get it. I know the PMP is the real sell piece here. I also trust that PMP is the cherry last minute right on top of that dessert. They will not miss it. They'll see the impressive education. They'll glance to the right and they suddenly go, oh, PMP. By the way, and if we're so enamored with our acronym, whatever it may be, there is a way to get it to the top of the resume. I could simply go John Krant, comma, PMP or CPA or whatever the acronym might be. It's a clever way to maybe get it to the top. Does not go in the positioning title in most cases. Other thing you see down here is community involvement. Does that really belong? What's that doing there? Interesting. Why are you interesting? What makes you tick? What drives you? Yeah. And I mean, if you've been doing something at some point for Habitat for Humanity, if you've been running a marathon or something like that and it's not on your resume, oh my gosh, that's a huge sell piece. Get it on there. People live vicariously and they want to know more about you. Now let's give you the sizing here. Yes, there is a whole resume off to the other side. We cut it off. Full disclosure, Betty Jo is my cousin. Figured you didn't need her phone number. So I just cut that part off. Let's give you the sizing. First recommendation is you select all the text and we have to pick a font. I recommend Arial, but strongly recommend either Arial, Verdana, or Helvetica. Those 3 exist on every computer known to man, and they're also clear, clean, straightforward fonts. Not Times, not Georgia, all these things with twists and curls. You may like the look of that. That is not easy to read. Print your resume out and whatever it is, Times, whatever, print it out in Arial side by side. Give yourself 3 to 5 seconds. There is no competition. Arial will win it, or Helvetica or Verdana will win it every single day. Now we're going to make the size, all the fonts, 10 point. Now, are you sitting down? Are you braced? Are you holding on to something? I hope. And we're going down from 10 point. These are not for you. And we have this false idea of what creates readability or legibility. It is not the font size in isolation. It's the font size in relation to the space between the letters and the space between the lines. The other thing I left out of my background story to you is before my time as a recruiter, I also ran a pre-press service bureau, which means I really do understand line and type and spacing. So the spacing I'm giving you here and the sizing, everything else, you can take it to the bank. It's also something that is not written down anywhere. So I highly recommend you write it down. So everything is 10-point bold. You know, the subtitle of my book is Changing the Rules. We're going to change the rules right away. Go up to the name, violate the rules, make it 18-point bold. This is no time for shyness. Big, bold John Crant. Then we want to take our contact information. You know, a lot of people stack that up like a layer cake, eating up valuable real estate on the single page resume. Single line for contact information. Now, this was the starter version, has the address, everything else. We hadn't worked on the LinkedIn profile yet. In the end, what I would like is your LinkedIn profile address starting off the list. Your city, state. Don't need to know you live at 123 Any Street. Your email address and ending in your phone number, because the two things on the outside are the things we want them to do. Either click on my LinkedIn profile if you're not quite convinced, or pick up the phone and call me. Now, that contact line, you'd like 7-point. This is 7-point. I guarantee you can read it. Now, when you make it 7-point, it's going to go like this and be completely unreadable. While it's highlighted, I'm going to go up to paragraph, down to, go up to format, down to paragraph, click on points after, a little part of the box that pops up, and simply enter a 2 and have a magical 2 points of space after the name before the contact line. Now I'm going to center this so we can see the rest of it. And let me just come a little bit larger here while we give you this piece. We'll bring the whole thing center. So the rest of it, let's think and be clear. The professional experience, which is also the same for education, I like those 8-point all cap. But if they're 8-point all cap and black, they draw way too much focus. Maybe I'll come in a little small here. They draw way too much focus. So I hit them with a little bit of gray. The professional experience, the education, anything else, a little bit of gray. And I start with 8-point, 8-point bold. Now, the brands, that's Good Samaritan Village, Salvation Army, any other employer that's on this sheet of paper are all 10-point bold. But I hope you've realized comma, location, and date are not only not bold, they're not 10-point. In fact, in this version, they're 7-point. You can have lots and lots of variety as long as you create a rule list. Consistency is the most important thing in design. You must apply it exactly the same way every time. Then people will react to you and go, it's just so readable, it's so available to me in their brain. And they don't understand why, which is from all this work. Now, let's go down to a normal employer title, which is the Salvation Army. We'll come back to Good Samaritan Village and that extra line there. Salvation Army and public relations, you see the title line. So title line, by the way, I like a 0.5 point less than the brand. That means the title line is 9.5 in size. And now we have to create some spacing. So after the brand, that's Salvation Army, we're going to highlight that line. We go up to format, down to paragraph, and in the points after little box, we simply type a 2, and magically 2 points of space arrive below the brand. Now I highlight the title line. I do the same thing up under format, down to paragraph. The box pops up. It says points after. In the box, I simply type 4, like 4 points of space after the title before the bullets. Now the bullet point set, and we're still going to go back to Good Samaritan Village about that extra line. The bullet point set, I scroll over each bullet point set, highlight it, make it 8.5 in size. And when you do, it's going to get a little tight, a little hard to read. While it's still highlighted, I fix it by simply going up to format, down to paragraph. And now I'm going to type in 1.75, enter. That's 1.75 points of space after every single bullet. And you realize the breathability, the life just comes back. Remember, pre-press background. You can take those font sizes and spacings to the bank. They work really, really well. Now let's go back to that extra different line, the nation's largest non-for-profit long-term care organization up by Good Samaritan Village. Now I spent 13 years in Florida before I escaped. And you know what? Every second or third mobile home or trailer park in Florida ends in the word village. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with working for a mobile home or trailer park. She does not work for a mobile home or trailer park. We cannot have someone make that assessment so quickly by mistake. Therefore, if this brand is unknown, we must put a qualifying line. The nation's largest not-for-profit long-term care, another significant employer, so the value does not get lost. Oh, you may fall in the trap of wanting one of these little lines under every employer. That's a huge mistake. If the brand is known to the person next to you, you do not need this. You need to use that real estate to talk about you. That's the really important piece. Now, your work pedigree. What are we after here? I mean, pedigree, that seems, I'm thinking horses, dog food. Okay, well, we got the right one. Maybe I'll come a little bit larger now. We've got the right word. So what are we talking about here? I'm just talking about when you think about how people value you, we may begin to think we understand the 3 to 5 seconds of the resume, but we're probably not really analyzing it the same way I am. We're looking at the quality of these companies, or at least my view of the quality of those companies, right or wrong. Titles and accomplishments, even though I said I wouldn't really read those things. Your educational background, my gosh, I hope we have the same experience, the same background. Otherwise, how am I going to think the same of you simply by having it on the sheet of paper? You're going to have to think about how you convey value. Now, as an example, here is literally the world's simplest resume. Todd Smith, Nestle USA, Director of Quality Assurance, Kraft Foods, Quality Assurance Manager, a Coca-Cola Company, Quality Assurance Engineer, University of Florida, BS in Agriculture. If this is all that's on the resume, I guarantee you this is the world's simplest resume. And yet, I think everybody watching here can make some value judgment about Todd. I mean, of course, got the degree. That's usually a pretty good thing. I see career progression. I see engineer to manager to director. And, oh my gosh, these are amazing companies. These are amazing companies, aren't they? Now, when I do this live, I have an audience that can react to me, and someone, I'll bait them a little bit with how I say it, and someone will go, yeah. I'm like, how do you know? How do you know they're a good company? By the way, I have a friend of mine who's worked for GTE Internetworking, which became Genuity, and Level 3 Communications, and Liberty Media, and Nokia Siemens Networks, and now they're over at Cisco Systems. And I can tell you, every single one of those companies I just mentioned is totally messed up beyond belief, like their employees going through a meat grinder spitting out parts. And yet the impression is, ooh, big companies. Now, I don't know if these are any good. I never did work food and beverage. They could be great. Have you worked for a great company? Please share that name. Or they could be messed up like every other company. Let's promote you up to manager. And you now have to hire this spot that Todd is applying for. You have one more interview spot open, but you have 2 candidates. You have Todd Smith here, who you see the whole background. You have this other candidate. By the way, you see the same University of Florida BS in Agriculture on the other candidate. You see the same engineer to manager to director on the other candidate, but they did it for 3 food and beverage companies you've never heard of. There's like a million of those. Let's see, Todd or the other person, Todd or the other person. There's no question here. Todd will get this interview every single time, and that's the power of brands. Value everywhere, nowhere to be seen. You've seen a resume with essentially nothing on it, and you could get the value direction. Where you're going to lose that value now is in what you put underneath those employers and titles. Your achievements have to be bullet pointed so they can be absorbed. And of course, have to have as many tangible, deliverable elements so they can imagine how you impact and change that company. Maybe you could impact and change my company the same way. It has to be transferable. They have to get excited. And that means as much as possible, dollar signs, percentages, wherever we can. And if not, you're very likely going to have to move toward visual language, like redevelop office workflow. Ooh, I can imagine that one as I read it or as you say it. Yeah, visual storytelling, so they can imagine the contribution. It's a very, very different thing. And that means we're going to have to put most of the story elements on these things. And did I increase the revenues or decrease the expenses, or somehow affected performance? Degrees of degrees. Have you received in hand your college degree? May sound a little strange. I learned to ask it that way as a recruiter because I found out people were lying to me. You know, it matters the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you know what 3 credits shy of a degree is? No degree. You know what? You didn't pay that $167 of fees you still owed. You know what that is? No degree. So if you didn't quite get your degree, my gosh, get your credit. Put the university, put your coursework toward the field of study, not coursework toward a BS and whatever. Too close to the baloney. You cannot have any 3-card Monty, any kind of thing going on your education. If they even sense that you're trying to misrepresent, you're dead in the water. Have to be extremely forthright. Put the coursework to, and whatever you accomplished in there, move forward and get that credit. By the way, you're going to be dinged on that in interview forevermore. Next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, whatever it is. Oh, you didn't finish your degree? You mean I didn't finish my degree 30 years ago? Did you look at how I've been contributing and knocking it out of the ballpark for the last 20 years for these major employers? They're going to hit that bell as a device in conversation to reset your financial expectations downward. Your job is to sidestep that, dismiss that, paint it as an advantage, and then go right to why they're interested in the first place. They would not waste oxygen on you if they didn't think, oh yeah, maybe. I have to hear what he says about this. Designing your resume. The idea is to move your brand forward. How do we move your brand forward? You help them visualize your career path. That's much more visual language, and really get rid of all that sentence structure that works against us. Of course, we still have to inform about educational background. A word about word as we approach the end of our session today. You know, I produce resumes in Word just like everybody else because that's the expected format. But if you do all this work that I just outlined for you on your resume, and you go through the 3, 4, 5 iterations, and then you are foolish enough to ever send someone a Word document, you have no idea what your resume actually looks like. It could look very similar or could look like a completely different animal because Microsoft has never bothered to ever fix the program. You spend all this time, when you send it to me, the preferences file that tells it all how to look perfect stays as part of your system. When it gets to my system, it opens by my preferences file, which could be very similar to yours and look okay, or could be a completely different animal. It's not actually going to change the words, but I've had resumes go from a single sheet of paper to a full page and a half because it's completely different formatting. So when you're all done, and there's a video over my YouTube channel called Headless Horseman, convert it over to a PDF that freezes it perfectly in state. I don't care what piece of software or computer generated. I don't care what one's looking at it. Perfect every single time, frozen in state. Wherever you are on your resume, understand you need to take either your first step or your next step and work on this. Don't stop too early. I just want to share just a few extra bonus conversations this afternoon about cover letter. This is where you have a chance. Remember, they're not going to read your cover letter unless you get your resume into Stack 1. But when you do get your resume into Stack 1, that's where the cover letter comes in. That's where they might look at it. So you have to be your authentic self. You have to show a brand vision. I lately often mentioned that I'm shy and introverted, which people usually laugh at because they've never really seen it. And yet this is what I do. Am I not being authentic because I don't show you that I'm shy and introverted? Nonsense. This is me too. The other person is me also. We just don't show that one. So yeah, you're going to have to balance. Now, there's an article over on my website that'll help you. Just click the advice tab. You can, by the way, see some resume samples and also knock, knock, how to write a cover letter that will open doors. This particular cover letter is going to help you, or this article on cover letters is going to help you with the overall structure. Let me just give you a little bit of an idea as we end up closing for today. Very, very similar, by the way, to the opening and closing arguments in front of the jury. Now, not a lawyer, but I've certainly seen a lot of television lawyers. And you know, the opening and closing argument in front of the jury, well, different rules of evidence apply. I can make a much more emotional pitch at that point. So that's your open and close to the letter, and 2 or 3 paragraphs in between, which may have a little more factual details that link it all up together. Essentially, positioning and serving yourself up on a silver platter, all to the excitement of them. That's the cover letter that will open doors for you. Thank you guys for joining in tonight. I really, really do appreciate it. Please don't hesitate to share it with your friends. This will stay up on Facebook and over on my YouTube channel for just a little bit. And if you need someone to work with you, someone to reinvent your resume or your LinkedIn profile, packages are over on my website, selfrecruiter.com, and I think you know how to reach me. And if you're not quite sure which one is the right one for you, we can always set up a time to talk about your individual challenge before you make that choice. Thank you guys for joining in, and have a great evening. Take care.